So you put together this great Twitter thread and you kind of loop it all together perfectly. So tell our audience right now the details behind all of this and how the election in Brazil kind of maps out why they're trying to censor X so bad.
Well, it's far worse than just the CIA warning Bolsonaro not to mess with his own election, as creepy and unusual as that is. The US State Department, which is essentially the older brother and the supervisor of much of the CIA covert action in support of State Department objectives, the State Department actually pulled favors and back channeled supplies from Taiwan of semiconductor materials that are necessary to make the electronic voting machines. So keep this in mind. This is at a time when the US is facing this massive shortage in semiconductors. And the US gets much of that from Taiwan Semiconductor. And the US State Department says, don't give the semiconductors to us American citizens. Give them to these Lula aligned Brazilian officials so that Brazil's election can supercharge. They use 3 to 4 times more electronic voting machines than they'd ever had in any past election. So the U.S. State Department back channels this huge onboarding of electronic voting machines, back channeling it to the Lula-oriented districts. Bolsonaro says, "Hey, I have a problem with these electronic voting machines. There might be fraud." So the CIA swoops in and warns him not to, quote, cast doubt on the electronic voting machines that the U.S. State Department just force fed the country of Brazil. And then on top of that, Lloyd Austin, the head of the Pentagon, flies down to meet with the Brazilian military and warns them that they will have problems from the U.S. military if the Brazilian military officials cast doubt on the voting machines or the election results that are now run on U.S. State Department software, essentially. So this is a major, major interference in Brazil's election. It's paid for by U.S. taxpayers and is done at the barrel of a gun by the CIA, the Pentagon, and the State Department. And getting back to this, what's happening right now with censorship on X and how it relates to what we just talked about with Mark Zuckerberg, there are two main encrypted chats in WhatsApp that were blamed for Bolsonaro's rise because the State Department had already coerced this censorship of Facebook ahead of the 2018 election that saw Bolsonaro rise to power. So all the pro-Bolsonaro folks in Brazil migrated to WhatsApp and Telegram. Now, WhatsApp is owned by Facebook. And so the U.S. State Department, through this capacity-built network of hundreds of NGOs down there in Brazil, but paid for by U.S. taxpayers, pressured the Brazilian government and pressured the Brazil High Court, the TSE court there, the censorship court going after Musk now, to pass all these restrictions on the use of Telegram or Brazil to support Bolsonaro, to support right-wing misinformation or to support election misinformation. And WhatsApp, again, folded like a lawn chair because the U.S. State Department and the White House put pressure on Facebook to censor WhatsApp. Telegram was a big holdout there. And this is one of the reasons that I find it very curious, this arrest of Pavel Durov, the head of Telegram, in order to get access to the back-end encryption in order to be able to censor propaganda channels that oppose the U.S. State Department. But effectively, this situation that's happening to X right now is not the story of, I mean, it's in part the story of a Brazil court gone rogue. But the much larger story is the U.S. State Department has been funding and bribing the entire network around that censorship court to get this all done. Incredibly, as we speak, there are Brazilian members of parliament who are in the United States on essentially a promotion tour about all of the censorship activities for members of Congress being censored, being arrested for tweets in Brazil. And the U.S. State Department funded NGOs were behind the bill stripping the language of parliamentary immunity for Brazil officials because the U.S. censorship squad said if the bill does not allow us to prosecute members of Congress, they should not have immunity just because Brazilian members of Congress spread right-wing misinformation. So X is caught in a proxy war between the U.S. State Department's desire for Lula to control the country and Bolsonaro supporters on X. So the State Department has pumped up this censorship mercenary army in Brazil to kill Bolsonaro supporters. X said free speech for all. Elon said free speech for all. So now they're going after X.
Yeah. And the thing also about this that I find concerning is a top official who was working for Bolsonaro during his time as president was arrested and wasn't actually charged, but he was held in prison for about 6 months. We actually had his attorney on this show. It was just an intimidation tactic to get him to turn on Bolsonaro so they could potentially lock him up. We saw that through the raid as well on his home, and it was over a COVID vaccine card. So the lengths that the government has gone to go after Bolsonaro are pretty extensive. But you're mentioning the State Department. What skin in the game would the State Department have to specifically target Brazil?
Oh, a million of them. They called
Mhm.
Bolsonaro the Trump of the tropics. And they labeled him a threat to democracy, an authoritarian who's taken the democracy into democratic backsliding. But behind that are all of the financial interests. The fact is Bolsonaro was at war with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, to the extent where the IMF basically left the country because Bolsonaro was not contorting the Brazilian economy and Brazilian political ecosystem towards the reforms that the IMF, the bankster gangsters, wanted Bolsonaro to put in place. And George Soros and his whole outfit there were massively behind this as well. George Soros usually functions as the kind of spokesperson of the IMF. This is one of the ways that banks get control of domestic policies, is that if you can't repay the payments or you don't want to do it according to a certain schedule, they basically allow you to punt so long as you go through with these democratic reforms. And basically, Bolsonaro was at war with the IMF. He was at war with a lot of the U.S. stakeholders that are represented by the Western Hemisphere division of the State Department. They called him an autocrat. They ousted him from office. They used censorship to do so, as well as potentially, and I don't know, if there was fraud in the voting machines, but it's highly unusual, I would say. I mean, imagine if Russia did that here. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, forced us to use, their electronic voting machines and sent the FSB and the Russian military and the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs to all coerce our people not to cast doubt on the Russian electronic voting machines. I mean, that would be an act of war. We would call it. But here it's actually done by us. But I do want to say one thing because it's breaking news just now. After months and months of my pressure, frankly, on the U.S. Embassy and me finally screaming through tweets that have gotten tens of millions of views in the past 48 hours. Finally, just today, the U.S. Embassy issued a statement that they are monitoring the situation in Brazil, to look for potential abuses to free speech rights from what's happening with X. But that's all they said. They did not condemn it. They did not say they have a problem with it. And the fact is it's much worse than monitoring it. They have been monitoring it because they have been funding it. What's happening right now is they are beginning to get the first patina of diplomatic blowback. So they want to make sure the result is achieved. That is, X cannot host pro Bolsonaro content while still maintaining this patina of diplomatic norms. But I'm telling you, if there's members of Congress who are listening to this right now, I'm looking into the camera and I'm looking at you, bring me in, set aside 2 hours, and I will provide you the entire network map of who's behind it from the State Department, who has been funding it, all of their internal videos, all of the documents. I will give you the network map to dismantle it, and then we'll see if this network, without its tens of millions of dollars of U.S. subsidies, still has the internal political will to go through with this.
Yeah. Well, I hope they do reach out because this is becoming infuriating that we're allowing to happen. And Congress did host like testimony from a couple. I know Paulo Figueroa testified in front of our U.S. Congress and spoke out about a lot of this, what he's witnessed as a journalist from Brazil. So I do hope they reach out and we'll definitely push this over to them because this is important, Mike.
Brianna, think about that.
Yeah.
Why was Elizabeth Bagley the U.S. ambassador to Brazil, whose job is to stop hostile foreign laws that impact U.S. national interests, U.S. corporations, and U.S. citizens? Why was the U.S. ambassador, the head of the U.S. embassy to Brazil, who back channels all major policy developments in Brazil in terms of its own domestic and foreign policy, why was she not called to testify? Why was the U.S. aid administrator, who's funded tens of millions of dollars to this Brazilian censorship industry, not called to testify? Why was the heads of the National Endowment for Democracy not called to testify? They were the ones who were coordinating the capacity built State Department network. Why was it all from the investigative journalist side and not the side that the House Foreign Affairs Committee actually has jurisdiction over? the State
Mm.
Department, USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, and our foreign policy apparatus institutions.
Well,
Are they
Mike,
protecting them?
that's my follow up. I'll directly ask. I'm fearless. I'll reach out and ask them because those are great questions that need to be answered. And also, Paulo Figueredo, before he actually went and testified, received contact by the FBI, who was looking to talk to him prior for him going up there and speaking. So again, there's a lot here that they're covering for, and the FBI still hasn't really had to answer any of those questions as well.
Well,
Surprise,
it's publicly
surprise.
reported the FBI played a role in Operation Car Wash in Brazil in the first place. So, anyway, there's a lot there, but
Mike knows all of those points too. It's incredible. Brazil, constantly people are like, "Oh, Brianna, just pay attention to what's going on here in the U.S." Everything is connected, and it's very important that we pay attention abroad as well because that's what's going to be happening. Well, I mean, we fund it, we're participating in it, and it's going to be extremely difficult for us in a couple of years to backpedal out of these situations. So it's important for us to pay attention to it. You guys, I can't believe we're heading into September. I mean, where has this year gone? We're literally almost in the fall. Summer's over. That's actually kind of horrifying. But as we get closer and closer to fall, we're about to be in winter, which means Christmas. It's not much of a reach, folks. And if you're looking to get ahead of getting a great Christmas gift, I've got a deal for you. You guys can't pass up on. Over at mypillow.com, Mike Lindell still has his $25 extravaganza going on right now. Now, the best way to lock in those great prices is by using promo code BRE. That's promo code BRE. He's got pillows, towels, dish towels, dog beds, slippers, sandals. So many of your favorite items are on sale right now. He even has some sales going on for Labor Day as well. So when you head on over, the best promo code to use is BRE. That's promo code BRE to save the most money at checkout.